Oh, what's happening is a kickoff of the Vincentennial event. We just happened to get lucky and have the first event, or the earliest event. We're going to do it with a fly, and we're doing it here in the Grand Hall because the auditorium, of course, you can't have popcorn or soda or candy. You can't watch Vincent Price without popcorn or soda or candy. So we decided to hold it up here, and we got to wait till about 8:30 for it to get dark so we can see real well, but I think it's going to be a fun time.
We were presented with the idea by Tom Stockman, who's our event director. Tom is a huge Vincent Price fan and also is a sort of man about town when it comes to cinema generally. He's been a longtime friend of the festival, and he thought we would be an appropriate partner. He wanted to do something to celebrate Vincent Price's 100th birthday, and he came to us. We said, sure, that sounds like a great idea. We weren't sure at that time what the scale of the event would be because we had to raise money in order to enable it. And one of the things that I thought was important is to make as many of the events, not all of the events are free, but many of the events that we're offering during Vincentennial are free, to make it as open to as many folks as possible. So that meant we had to raise a fair amount of money. And we did. We were successful in doing that. We got grants from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, from our title sponsor is MICDS, Mary Institute in St. Louis Country Day School, which is the high school in which Vincent Price attended. We also had support from the Missouri Arts Council, Missouri Humanities Council, the St. Louis CBC. So there's a lot of people who ended up contributing to enable this to take place. Once we were comfortable with the fact that we were going to be able to raise the money, at that point we sort of exploded the event. We worked with Tom to sort of put together a list of films that we thought were absolutely key. We wanted to do all the main 4 films, obviously, but we also wanted to make certain that we were encompassing Vincent Price's full career, not just doing the stuff that everybody knows, but also his classical Hollywood career, and then some of the performances that occurred later in his life that really were quite good, that perhaps people haven't been exposed to. Particularly The Whales of August, I thought, was an important film to show. Then we started tracking down guests. Roger Corman was at the top of our list because he was such an important collaborator with Price. So we said, let's try it. It never hurts to ask, and indeed, he was open to it. So we're going to be having 2 programs with Roger Corman. We're very happy to have that. Tom had initiated conversations with Victoria Price, Vincent Price's daughter. So we're having her come in. She was excited about being a participant. We're doing several programs that she'll be featured in. The big one on the birthday itself, in which she'll be presenting a multimedia show about her father, his life, and his career.
I end up with my finger.
All the local critics.
I've been a fan of Vincent Price since I was a little kid. Anything that he appeared on, whether it be a television show or a movie, I was always begging my dad to take me to the movies to see his latest one. Just collecting clippings, and once I got big enough, I could go into flea markets and buy photographs and posters, and it just took off after that. And so I've collected probably since I was about 8 years old, and I put the website up because after he died, I got the feeling that a lot of people weren't aware of what he was famous for anymore. So I put all this stuff up that I'd collected, and it's gotten a great response. A lot of people enjoy coming to it.
So what kind of features are on this site itself, like artwork or like things like that?
Posters, stills, lists of his films, TV shows, articles, books. I've tried to include everything. I mean, the guy was into everything. Recipes. He was a great cook. Mostly movie stuff, but a lot of other stuff that his other interests that he had.
So is your house like a big Vincent Price museum also, or?
No, my wife wouldn't like that too much. We have a few things up, but I don't monopolize the walls with Vincent. So having this Vincentennial come up was just great because it gave me a chance to send some of my best collectibles out here for the display up at the Sheldon. And of course, I'm thrilled to be part of the film festival too this weekend. So this is just like a dream come true for a Vincent Price geek.
Yeah. So there's some memorable movies or things like that for people to check out as that I haven't heard about Vincent Price before?
I would say definitely give him a start with his older movies. There's one called Dragonwick, which is on DVD, and it's a really good gothic tale. It's probably the first movie that he was in that he played kind of a madman, you know. And then, of course, House of Wax, which is hard to get in 3D anymore, but it's still a good movie if you watch it flat. Any of the Edgar Allan Poe movies he did in the 60s. And then there are a couple other ones. He did one near the end of his life called The Whales of August. He did with Bette Davis and Lillian Gish. And it really shows him performing the way he started his career in very straight roles.
And what I remember Vincent Price from is the Brady Bunch, the 2-part Hawaii episode.
With the tiki doll, yeah.
Oliver, how could I have been so careless? I should have covered the entrance to the cave better. Those children are going to ruin everything. I've got to get rid of them.
Yeah. No, he did that kind of thing actually for his daughter. He'd do kids shows because his daughter was born in 1962, so you see him show up in a lot of kids shows in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was for her. And whenever he'd go on one of those shows, he'd bring home autographs of all the stars and give them to her. Last Man on Earth was, based on a great novel, the same one that Omega Man, the Will Smith movie,
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend, and the Omega Man was the one with Charlton Heston. But this little black and white film that he did back in '64 is always brought up to compare with these multi-million-dollar movies, and the little black and white film always wins out. People like that the best. So it's a great film, and The Tingler, of course, is a lot of fun, and they're going to have a lot of fun with it here tonight because they got gimmicks going on in the theater. So I think it's going to be a really great time.
The whole Tingler experience has been great fun because we've been practicing all of our many stunts. We infiltrated the Emergo into the thing because we weren't going to be able to do House on Haunted Hill. But we had the light strobe effect, and then Joe Webbers and I practiced being victims. It was great fun. He had a life-size model of a Tingler that someone in Switzerland had made for Bruce Goldstein, who introduced the film. And it was just great fun. We practiced all the flashlights and everything too, and bursting out the side door and screaming and yelling and choking. It was so much fun.
And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Tom Stockman and I are friends on Facebook, and I'm the artistic associate director of the Avalon Theater in Crestwood. So one day Tom happened to be coming by Crestwood, and I was in there, and he knocked on the door and came in, and we talked for a long time. I'd never met him before, even though we were friends on Facebook because of our similar interests. And he said, I know that you just won the Kevin Kline Award for Best Actor by doing a one-man show on John Barrymore. And he explained to me about the whole Vincentennial celebration that was coming up, and he said, would you be interested in doing something in the Vincentennial? And I said, well, I'd love it because I've been a Vincent Price fan all my life, and I would certainly wanted to be a part of the Vincentennial somehow. So we kind of kicked around a couple of ideas. We had even talked about a whole evening of Edgar Allan Poe, but there just wasn't time to get it together. I'm involved in like 3 or 4 other productions at the time. So what it came down to was he said, well, would you do some readings? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So he asked me to do Pit and the Pendulum the night they were showing the movie. And I got back to him, I said, that runs 45 minutes. I don't know if you want to do that whole story. So I said, how about I do The Raven instead? It's very associated with Price, and it's of course associated with Corman and Poe, and he said, that's great, I love The Raven. So the first night I did The Raven, and then we agreed on doing The Telltale Heart the night Victoria Price was going to be here. And so I spent like the last couple of months working on it, and even though I don't really do an imitation of Vincent Price, I would like to think of it more as an interpretation of Vincent Price, as a homage to him. So I tried to capture the same style that he would say it in, and the same, a little bit of the same inflections, and not without being an out-and-out steal copy. So, and I had a great time doing that. I loved it.
Just watch all of his movies to practice his movements, or how did you?
I did, yes, I watched. In fact, I have a huge Vincent Price film collection. I'm an avid film collector. I have probably over 4,000 movies on DVD and VHS. So, and I have a whole shelf that's just Vincent Price films. And so I mean, I watched them all my life anyway. But when I knew I was doing this, I pulled them out. I watched more of them. I watched his rendition of An Evening of Edgar Allan Poe, which he does the Telltale Heart. I also found a copy on YouTube of him doing The Raven. And I noticed he had the long red robe when he did it, so I thought I chose that as my costume. And since I'm a Muni veteran, I've been in over almost 50 shows here at the Muni, I kind of wheedled my way into their costume department and found a coat that was absolutely appropriate. And this is a little possible tidbit of information. The coat that I wore might be, there's no way to prove it, but it might be the actual coat Vincent Price wore when he did Damn Yankees at the Muni and he played Applegate, the devil. We don't know, we can't prove it in any way, shape, or form, but the costumer here said it was a coat like that, and it has been hanging in the wardrobe here at the Muni for years. So maybe it was, I'd like to think it was, but who knows?
Is there any moments in the Vincent Price Poe films that stand out to you?
Oh gosh, lots of them. Well, I certainly think in House of Usher, the scene where, or several scenes rather, where we see Vincent with the shock of white hair is a visually striking image. And then there's the dream sequence in that film where we see Vincent Price carrying off Myrna Fahey as his sister, Madeline Usher. That's a very disturbing scene. Anytime Price looks at his co-star, he has this paternal, brotherly look, but sometimes that look is a little bit more sensual than I think people ought to look at their sisters. And I don't think he goes over the top with it. I think it's subtle. It's something that could be in bad taste, but he makes it work. So all of those shots are really very good. And in Tomb of Ligeia, the film that Roger Corman discussed tonight, where Price is almost sort of the negative image of Roderick Usher, where he's all in black and he has black hair and he's shaved his trademark mustache, looks a lot younger, like a more romantic hero. Every time he appears wearing dark sunglasses, so that he's almost this modern neo-goth figure, just very striking. I never get tired of watching those.
I feel very lucky to be from the same city as Vincent Price. I really do, and it's really great, and it really warms my heart to see this huge crowd of people, not just St. Louisans, but people have traveled from all over the country. I've had people come up to me this past week from all parts of the United States, as well as Germany and England. It's just really a testament to how beloved Vincent Price is.
Whereas, Vincent Price is among St. Louis's most well-known and beloved native sons. He was born in St. Louis 100 years ago on May 27, 1911. And whereas Vincent Price was a distinguished actor who excelled in film, stage, TV, and radio, his extraordinary career spanned more than 50 years. To this day, he remains the world's most iconic star of horror films. And whereas Vincent was a connoisseur and collector of art, a master chef and cookbook author, and raconteur of the highest order. And whereas the city of St. Louis is pleased to join the Cinema St. Louis in honoring the life and legacy of Vincent Price. His contribution to the filming industry will live on in the hearts and minds of all. Now, therefore, I, Francis G. Slay, Mayor of the City of St. Louis, do hereby proclaim May 27, 2011 as Vincent Price Day in the City of St. Louis.
So after college, he took a year off to try to figure out what to do, and he taught at Riverdale Country Day, a school much like MICDS. And it was outside of New York, so he could go see plays and go to museums, and he tried to figure out what to do, and he decided that he wanted to get his master's in art history. So he applied. He was loved England, loved Europe, had been to Europe by himself when he was 17 years old. His parents let him go on the grand tour to see art. So he wanted to go back to Europe, and he got into the University of London's very prestigious Courtauld Institute. And here he is looking quite the Londonist. His specialty was the School of Dürer, so he studied in Nuremberg, he studied in Vienna at the famous Albertina, and mostly he was based out of London, where he lived on Baker Street, which I think is pretty fashionable. But a friend of his, knowing of his passion for the theater, he literally my dad went to see John Gielgud's Hamlet like 10 times. He said, why don't you try out for a play? There's a play showing, being auditioned at a private theater club, and it's called Chicago. Now, Chicago was banned in the United States because it was too racy, and yes, it was the play on which the musical was based. So my dad tried out, and he got a part, which he's convinced that he got because he could walk and chew gum at the same time. Apparently gum chewing was not very popular in England in the 1930s, and he played a cop on the beat who walked and chewed gum. So he was bitten by the acting bug.
My dad was asked by Tim Burton to do the part of the inventor in Edward Scissorhands, and actually it was written for him. And so he was really honored to do it. And Tim had this idea that it would be fun if I had a part in it. So I went to Florida to film mine, and it was really amazing. We were in this just surreal, I mean, the neighborhood really looked very similar to how it looks. I mean, of course, Tim made it look, more cookie cutter and suburban, but it was really neat. And the best part about doing it for me was the amazing women, this ensemble of women who played all the housewives. I got to hang out with them, and that was very exciting. And working with Tim was really neat. He's such a talented and incredible guy. I've gotten to do a few other things for him since then. He's written a book about his art, and I got to write a small contribution in there, which was really, really fun. But I think for my dad, Edward Scissorhands was this incredible gift because it was the swan song of his career. To have a part written especially for him and to get to do something like that was really incredible. It was an amazing thing, and I'm so grateful to Tim. Well, I think when my dad first met Tim, he thought he was this kind of quirky, really talented guy, and he really respected him. He thought Tim was a really good artist. My dad loved drawings, and Tim drew really well, and so he loved what he had done with Vincent. He thought the whole thing was incredible, and they had a wonderful relationship, and I think both admired each other. Tim certainly loved my dad when he was growing up and very much admired my dad's career, but I think that my dad really admired that Tim was a unique talent, and you don't always find that in Hollywood.
What is that magic and that appeal that lives on for?
That's a really good question. I think my dad's appeal is that even when he was playing somebody who was really bad, who was a real villain, underneath it you had the sense, first of all, that there was somebody who had this sort of sense of humor, and he wasn't totally scary. He would scare you to death, but underneath you knew everything was going to be okay, because at heart my dad was a gentle man. But I think really more than that, in the parts he played, there was usually a reason for his villainy. Something horrible had been done to him, and he was trying to get revenge. And you had the sense that he wouldn't be doing that if something bad hadn't been done to him. And I think people identify with that as well. A good man who's been harmed and needs to go out and exact his revenge. But I also think that people knew my dad's off-screen persona and what a kind and generous man he was, and I think that made a big part of the difference as well.
And also, how much of his art interest influenced your art and design with that? Like, did you take you to galleries? And what kind of things did that influence?
I absolutely became interested in the arts because of my dad. When I was a little girl, my dad would take me to museums and he would teach me about the art in the house that I grew up in. And he made it so interesting. You know, it didn't just seem like stuff on the walls that you were supposed to look at and walk past. He made it seem like it was full of life. And there were these incredible stories behind it. And he told me about the artists and why they did what they did. And it became our language together. We used to have a competition. I would get to see something that he hadn't seen, which was rare, but he would be so jealous, and then he would go see something. And it wasn't about sort of I've seen it or you've seen it. It was about sharing that experience and say, oh my God, what was it like in person, and tell me all about it, which was really incredible. So.
Is there any birthday memories that you remember of your father's that stand out?
I think his last birthday was my favorite because I hadn't really gotten to spend that much time with him because of my stepmother. And so his last birthday was just us and my friends. And we just, had a really wonderful day laughing. And it was really my dad at his sweetest and most open. And it wasn't pretentious. It was just real and funny. And I'm glad I got to spend that last birthday with him.
I think I was originally going to do an evening at the Way Out Club, as I've said. That was originally Vincentennial was one night, then it grew into a weekend, and I think it was probably around the time I talked to Joe Edwards, and he got real excited about it. He wanted to kind of do it on the loop, and he loved the idea. He wanted to get involved, and about that time I got in touch with Victoria. Victoria said, I think St. Louis would be the perfect city to throw a big 100th birthday event for my father. I think it was about that time where I said, well, this is so much potential to be a big event, and I don't have that kind of experience throwing an event on that scale. So, but I've been an active volunteer with Cinema St. Louis for many years, and I know Cliff and Chris and Brian pretty well, so I felt comfortable calling these guys up. I called them up on a Friday. I said, Cliff, I have an idea for an event. I think we should team up on it. And he said, what is it? And I said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, meet with me Monday. And he said, okay. So I went in on Monday, and I said, Vincentennial, the Vincent Price 100th birthday celebration. And he said, well, who do you think that would appeal to? And I said, Cliff, I think it appeal to a lot of people. It's going to appeal to people that normally go to Cinema St. Louis events. And I think it's going to appeal to this whole other sort of horror movie crowd. It's going to appeal to a wide spectrum of fans of horror, fans of the arts, fans of highbrow films, fans of lowbrow films, fans of theater, fans of literature. And I think Cliff recognized it was a great idea right away and quickly embraced it and got straight to work raising funds, facilitating venues, establishing exhibition rights for the films we wanted to show. It's just grown and grown and grown. Here we are. It's over, but here we are.
What are some moments that stood out to you throughout the week?
Last night's presentation by Victoria Price about her father so exceeded my expectations of what she was going to say. She really went into depth. She talked about things I had never heard her talk about, even in her book. She showed some photos that no one had seen. I talked to Vincent Price scholars and historians and biographers and collectors, and they were in town, and a lot of them were last night, and they had never seen most of these photos that she was presenting. That was a huge, huge, huge highlight. I don't know, and then goofy stuff like showing a Dr. Goldfoot in the Girl Bombs at midnight at the Way Out Club on Thursday.
Yes, it's Vincent Price as that tongue-in-cheek terrorist, Dr. Goldfoot. An exact reproduction and programmed for love and destruction. Poof! A wonderful explosion that destroys not only my love bombs, but their victims as well.
I guess the biggest highlight for me personally was Sunday night when Tim Lucas interviewed Roger Corman, and Roger Corman went out the side door, and then I got to go out to dinner with Roger Corman and Tim Lucas, who are two of my heroes. So that was a huge, huge, huge highlight for me.